If your accounts payable or AP person spends half their week typing data from PDFs into your ERP or accounting system, this video is for you. Look, if you're running an agency, a consulting firm, a legal firm, or any other professional services business, and you feel like AI should be doing something useful in your back office, but you're not sure what, I'm going to show you a real automation we built which takes vendor invoices from email all the way through to a draft in the ERP system without anyone touching a keyboard. But before I show you the demo, let me give you some context as to why this matters. A typical professional services firm will be processing around 100 invoices a week, and that normally takes 10 minutes per invoice of manual data entry. Well, that's 867 hours a year at a fully loaded cost of $50 an hour. So that's including employer taxes, medical, social security, etc. That's over $43,000 in direct labor costs every year, just for typing data from PDFs into your system. And that's before we count things like errors that need rework, late payment penalties, or missed early payment discounts. And for marketing and advertising agencies, the numbers are significantly higher. Invoice volumes of 500 to 1,500 a month are not unusual when you factor in things like media spend, freelancers, production costs, and ad tech tools. The labor cost scales accordingly. Most firms look at this and think, oh, well, it's just overhead. But it's not anymore. It's a measurable, avoidable expense. Now, some caveats before we go any further. These figures come from industry benchmarks, so your numbers will vary. But if you process any more than 50 invoices a week, the business case is almost certainly there. We're in a fortunate position to provide ERP technology and fractional finance teams to our clients, and that gives us great visibility into the potential gains AI and process automation can deliver to them. Vendor invoice processing is an excellent example. The invoice arrives by email. Then someone has to manually open the email, read the PDF, enter the data into the ERP, and route it for approval. Every day, hours of it. And we know that because we've seen it. We were working with a firm quite recently where the AP lady was spending 2 to 3 hours every morning of registering invoices before she did anything else. So we just built an automation to handle it. And I want to walk you through exactly what it does. It's obviously difficult to show a workflow that runs in the background, but I'm going to start by showing you workbook before I run the workflow. So you can see that the last invoice registered was last year in 2025. The workflow actually starts in the AP inbox. As you can see, ap@agencysoft.io is the inbox that we've set up. And our demo version is manually triggered, but the final version is initiated on the arrival of an email. When an email arrives, the automation wakes up and begins processing it. I'm going to run it manually. The automation wakes up and begins processing the email, and it identifies the attachment and checks whether it's a PDF or not before going further. Emails that don't contain a PDF, the attachment is ignored. The workflow is only interested in potential invoices. Now, this workflow could easily be amended to include other document types. However, we decided against that for this prototype. The next thing it does is it checks to see if the text is readable or not and usable, because some PDFs include images where the text can't be read. Again, we could amend the workflow so that it makes the text readable. We haven't done that for this case. The next thing is that the invoice is passed through to the AI model. The AI's first job is not to extract data. It's to actually decide what type of document it is. Is it an invoice? Or is it a statement? Or a pro forma? Or a purchase order? Or even a payment reminder? This matters because AP inboxes are notoriously noisy. Vendors send all types of documents, and we don't want to create a draft invoice in the ERP that's a statement. If the AI determines it's not an invoice, it's actually flagged and routed to finance for review. In our invoice, it's just moved to a folder called failed, and nothing gets created in the ERP. If it is an invoice, the AI extracts the key fields. So for example, if I look at the executions here, it will see whether it's an invoice, the vendor name, the vendor number, the PO number, the job number, all the information that's required to import in the ERP. There's a few things worth noting about how we built this though. Those of you who are more technical have noted there are several sub-workflows to the main workflow, as you can see. This is deliberate. That means you can easily swap out validations. You can easily swap out the ERP. while keeping good guardrails on all of the work that's being done. That's the best practice that keeps everything clean and safe and easy to audit. Before anything does go into the ERP, the workflow runs a set of business checks, which you can see here. Does the invoice total match the sum of the invoice lines? Is the currency one that the firm accepts? If there's a PO, does it match the resolved vendor? And is the vendor resolved itself? If everything passes, the workflow creates the drafter under invoicing workbook. As you can see here, the workflow has created 3 invoices in 2026. It records the vendor ID, the invoice number, the amount, and items if present. It also will record the PO number if relevant. You can also see that the PDF is attached to the record. So the draft is ready for finance to review and approve through Workbook's standard approval flow. The approval process itself is handled natively in ERP. The automation doesn't touch that. At the end of each processing run, the workflow will send a summary report to the finance team. In this instance, it's just a draft. But as you can see, the report shows invoices that were created successfully and the invoices that failed and why. Nothing is processed silently. Finance can see exactly what came in, what was posted, and what needs their attention. Let me put some numbers into this using the framework from our recent blog post on hilysolutions.com, and I'll put the link in the description below. If you process 100 invoices a week and 80% of them go through without any manual intervention, you've eliminated approximately 830 hours of manual data entry per year. And at $50 an hour fully loaded cost rate, that's around $41,000 of direct labor savings annually. The remaining 20%, which is the exceptions, still do need a human. But instead of spending nearly half their working week on data entry, your AP person is spending 3 to 4 hours a week reviewing the edge cases. And that's a different job. It requires judgment, not repetition. The typical payback period for an implementation like this is 3 to 6 months based on labor savings alone. Now, your numbers will differ. If you process fewer invoices, the math changes. If you're an agency that spends 500 invoices a month, on the other hand, the case is even stronger. And this doesn't account for things like data entry errors, late payment penalties, early payment discounts, which can all add meaningful value depending on your current process. What I'd encourage you to do now is run your own numbers. Take your weekly invoice count and multiply it by 10 minutes and then by 52 weeks, and finally by the hourly rate. If any of these numbers are different for your firm, then by all means, amend them and see what the business case looks like. That's your baseline. Compare it to what a proper implementation would cost, and you'll have a realistic picture really, really quickly. This is the kind of AI application that actually makes sense for a professional services firm right now. Not because it's the most impressive AI demo you'll ever see. In fact, as you can see, I'm not very good at doing demos, but because it solves a real recurring expensive problem without requiring you to make a bet on technology that's still unproven. This workflow doesn't make decisions. It doesn't approve invoices. It doesn't create vendors, and it doesn't post to the ledger. Every one of these controls stays with a human, but what it does do is eliminate the mechanical work between an invoice arriving and a finance person being able to act on it. That's the right starting point for most firms. But that said, we're already working on a second version, and it will do things like answer simple questions, for example, the invoice status queries or the expected payment dates. It will respond to a sender saying a PO number is missing or required, if it's required, or if the invoice amount exceeds a PO amount. It will respond to the sender if the AP or vendor record is not found, so that it can contact finance. These are all perfectly possible with the technology available today, and will only help improve your AP function going forward. If you found this useful and you want to understand what this could look like in your firm, we'd be glad to talk. At Highly Solutions, this is what we do. We help professional services firms implement AI properly in their back office. Come and find us at hilysolutions.com. And if you want, we can also help evaluate your specific ROI before you commit to anything. Thanks for watching. And if you do like this, please do subscribe.